Hello, it's Alex, the Bookubus. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in November. I read 5 books in total, a bit different to my 19 books in October, but yeah, and most of those were really short books, a lot of middle grade and young adult vintage stuff, so yeah, that was why I read so many books last month. This month was a bit more back to regular kind of numbers, and yeah, I read 5 books. One was a novella, 3 were novels, and 1 was a true crime book. I'm just going to talk about these in the order that I read them. So first up is Cain Kills by Brian McAuley. This is a novella, and I did receive a copy from the publisher, Shortwave Publishing, so thank you to them. I did really enjoy this one, and yeah, with it being a novella, it's a pretty quick read. This is my first time reading this author and I had a really good time with it, so I do look forward to checking out some more by Brian McAuley at some point. This is a Christmassy type of horror story, so perfect for the season, and it's about a family who go on a holiday for Christmas break to this remote cabin, and of course things go horribly wrong. In this instance it's because there was a massacre that took place in this cabin years previously, which they did not know about when they booked it, but maybe the killer is still out there, and yeah, maybe there are bodies piling up as the story goes on. So yeah, this is a slasher story and I thought it was really well paced. I enjoyed the characters, there is enough about them to get invested in them and care about them, but yeah, there's enough like fun stuff with the action and the kills to really keep the story moving at a good pace. I rated this one 4 stars, and yeah, like I said, it's perfect for the Christmas season, so I would definitely recommend it. Next up, I read Garth Marenghi's Incarcerat. This is the 2nd book in his Teratome trilogy, and this is my signed copy, prized possession. And so this one follows on from the events in the 1st book, Teratome, which came out last year, I think. I just read it earlier this year, but that was a 5-star read. This is a 5-star read. They're just absolutely brilliant. If you don't know who Garth Marenghi is, then you need to look him up and get on the Garth Marenghi train. I suggest watching Dark Place if you haven't already. So these stories are following horror author Nick Steen, and in the 1st book, Teratome, we get 3 stories that are interconnected, and then Incarcerat picks up following on from those stories, and we have 3 more stories here which again are interconnected. And yeah, so we have one story which is about this shady like scientific research company and some crazy things that are going on there. We have a gothic horror story involving a creepy house and a creepy doll, and we also have a story involving a dream demon. So yeah, quite an array of subgenres here, and this was just an absolute ton of fun to read. As you know, I'm like a huge Garth Marenghi fan and so I was bound to love this, but yeah, I genuinely did have such a good time with it, and it just gave me everything I wanted, really. Yeah, I am very much looking forward to the 3rd book. I don't know if there's been a release date yet for it, but obviously I will be keeping my eyes peeled. These books are clever in the way that they riff on the genre of horror. They're very funny and just very entertaining to read. I had a really good time with this one and I gave it 5 stars, so yeah, it's definitely going to be on my list of favourites for the year. Next up, I read Morbid Curiosity by Deborah Leblanc. This one came out, let me check, I think it was 2007. I buddy read this with the composer next door, whose channel you should absolutely be subscribed to if you aren't already, so I will leave a link to her channel below. Definitely go check it out. And yeah, this one was a bit of a mixed experience for us. The premise is a good one, but I don't think it quite lived up to its potential, unfortunately. So this is about teenage twin sisters, Hayley and Heather, and they are sent to live with their grandparents. So they're starting at a new school and yeah, trying to fit in and stuff. And they meet this one girl who is kind of weird but also really popular, and she is into chaos magic, and she promises them the ability to basically have whatever they want, as long as they perform these rituals correctly, and because they're twins it should have, you know, like double the effect or whatever. But of course, as with most books in the horror genre, things go horribly wrong. And yeah, this one started off really well. I was really enjoying it actually at the beginning. It was very readable and yeah, just kind of easy to get into their story. I enjoyed the early ritual stuff that they were doing. There are some other characters involved. We have the grandparents, of course. We have a teacher at their school, and there's also this shady guy who is also, yeah, into chaos magic, and yeah, he becomes involved with the twins as well, and yeah, things go from there. Basically one of the twins really wants to get into it, whereas one of the twins doesn't, and so there's a conflict there. But yeah, unfortunately I think this one, at times it got a bit silly, and then at times it got quite repetitive as well, so it kind of lost the spark that it had for me initially. And I did finish it, but yeah, I think overall, because it was such a mixed bag for me, there were parts that I liked and then parts not so much. So overall I gave this a 3-star, and I mean, I would, yeah, not rule out reading any more by this author. I'm not really familiar with the rest of her work, so if you've read anything of hers that you would recommend, then let me know. Next up, I read Penance by Eliza Clark, and this is the author who wrote Boy Parts, which I read last year and really, really enjoyed. Penance is very different to Boy Parts, so yeah, if you read that, definitely don't go in expecting the same kind of thing. This one is written as though it's a true crime book, and we're following a fictional case and an author who is writing about it. What happened in this particular case is that a group of teenage girls tortured and killed another teenage girl. So yeah, that's where we start, and as we go on we learn more about the case, we learn more about these people, we learn more about the author. It has a really interesting commentary on true crime, which I've never, I don't think, kind of experienced in a book before, in that, yeah, it does open up discussion for how problematic true crime can be, in that, yeah, you know, it can be very exploitative. These are real people involved, and using that as a form of entertainment is, yeah, questionable. So there's that element of the book that is really, really interesting and really, really well done. And then the story itself is just really interesting and really compelling, and the way that the author, Eliza Clark, kind of slowly gives us information as the book goes on, and the way that that affects your opinion of certain characters is really excellently done. Yeah, I had such a good time with this book. It was, like I say, very compelling. It was one that I was excited to pick up and see what was going to happen next. This was another buddy read actually. I read this with my friend Emily, and having the discussions as we went along really added to the experience, because there was so much to discuss here. It really is very thought-provoking and, yeah, discussion worthy. So if you're looking for a book for a buddy read or like a book club or something, I would really, really recommend this one. It also looks at other topics like female identity and toxic friendship, and yeah, I think if you've ever been a teenage girl, even if not in the era that these particular characters are in, so I think they were born in like 2000-ish, but I think if you've just ever been a teenage girl in general, you will relate to these characters in some way, and you might well be triggered in some way by yeah, some of the things here involving these characters. Yeah, I definitely felt seen and maybe not in a good way. So anyway, that was all super interesting, and yeah, just looking back on the reading experience of this book was, yeah, just a really good one, because there really is so much to unpack here and talk about, and I don't know, I feel like it's been a while since I've read a book like that, so this was just a really good experience. I ended up rating this one 4.5 stars, and I think the only reason that it didn't quite hit a 5-star for me is because some of the sections of the book, like a true crime book would, they just kind of go off into some tangents about like local history, like related to this case, and I don't know, I just felt like at times it kind of went a bit off track too much maybe, but yeah, it was still a really excellent book. And yeah, I know there are other books like fiction that present themselves as true crime, but I've never read one that actually has like a commentary on true crime itself. So if you know of any like that, please let me know. I'd really be curious to read more things like this. I don't know if they exist. And I would compare it to something like the film Funny Games, which is essentially a commentary on violence in cinema. And yeah, it's basically saying, you know, are you entertained by this? I think this book does the same thing for true crime and really makes you reflect on, yeah, the people that create and consume true crime, and yeah, just the discussion of the exploitation there and the problematic nature of everything involved, basically. So yeah, will it stop me from reading and watching true crime? In a word, no, but it does open up a very interesting topic of conversation. So anyway, there's so much more to say about this book, there really is, but I will A, stop rambling, and B, not get into spoiler territory. So yeah, take that for what it's worth, but another one that's going to be on my favourites of the year, so highly recommend. This isn't horror, just to clarify, but it is, yeah, dark true crime themed literature, if that's a genre. So yeah, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And then last up, I read a true crime book. Oh, the irony. So I actually picked this up earlier in the month and was kind of reading it on and off throughout the month. I had this book on my 23 books to read in 2023, and I thought, why not pick it up for non-fiction November? But yeah, coinciding it with Penance is, yeah, I guess just highlights yeah, some things. So anyway, this book is Raising Hell, an encyclopedia of devil worship and satanic crime by Michael Newton. So definitely, I mean, pretty lurid and sensational, as a lot of true crime is. And this is quite a long book. It's like 400 pages long. Before picking this up, I didn't really know what kind of format it was going to be. I know it says encyclopedia on there, but I guess it just didn't really twig. But that is what it is. It's separated, you know, from A to Z with various cases and topics related to, yeah, satanic crime. So there are some cases here that I had already heard of, like Son of Sam and Richard Ramirez, etc. But there's a ton of other cases here that I'd never heard of. Some of them only get like a paragraph, some of them are a few pages long, and some of them are, you know, tenuously linked to Satanism, in that a crime occurred and then police found like a copy of the Satanic Bible or like a black cloak or something in, you know, the perpetrator's possessions or in their home or whatever. So some of them were a bit like, well, that's not necessarily a satanic crime then, there might not necessarily be a link. But other ones definitely were, in the sense that the perpetrators are like, yes, I'm a Satanist and I did this killing for Satan, you know, and things like that. So very interesting to read. This came out in 1993, so obviously you know, these are all cases that took place before then, plus, you know, the satanic panic era was still, yeah, pretty full on. I mean, not that it's gone away completely, but this was definitely like, you know, the time that was a big deal. And this book isn't only true crime cases, it does touch on other subjects that may or may not be related, like heavy metal music and backmasking. I will say I didn't read this one cover to cover. I did read most of it, but there was the occasional section that I just skipped, like the child abuse section. I was just like, even by the time I got to the letter C, I'd already read other cases involving child abuse and I was kind of over it. I didn't really want to read a dedicated section about that. And you know, there were still cases involving that I read after that section, so I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna skip that, I think. I'm not really feeling it. So, you know, I allowed myself to skip certain sections that I just wasn't that interested in, or I felt like were a bit repetitive, because it does, you know, cover a lot of the same ground throughout the book. So yeah, I did read the majority of it though, and I still think it's worth a 4-star rating, because just the fact that so many satanic related cases were put together in one book, I think, yeah, is worthy of a 4-star, really, because there's just a lot of information here. And yeah, like I said, a ton of cases that I'd never heard of before. And yeah, I think there is obviously a much bigger discussion to have about true crime and the consumption of it. Like, you know, why is it interesting? What am I getting out of this? You know, is it just titillating, or am I actually learning anything? Yeah, I don't know if I have the answers right now, but it's open for discussion for sure. But yeah, I thought this was a well put together book on the topic and was interesting to read. Yeah, definitely some disturbing material here. Yeah, some of these cases, especially the ones involving children, were, yeah, not fun to read about. Which, yeah, again, begs the question, why the fuck am I reading it then? Anyway, this is a whole kettle of fish that I'm not going to get into, I guess, right now. But if you have any thoughts on the subject, I would love to hear about them. And yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. Oh, but one last thing to mention about this one. This is quite hard to find. I looked it up online and I think the cheapest copy right now is like $50. I was lucky enough to find this copy at a library book sale like a year or 2 ago, and I pounced on it because I knew it was kind of a rare one. So yeah, sadly this one doesn't seem super easy to find, but if you do, then I'd nab it. Anyway, that about wraps up my reading for November. Let me know if you read any of these. I would love to hear your thoughts on them, and definitely tell me about what you've been reading in November, if you have any new favourites. And side note, I am wearing this, it's a dress that I got. It's like a sparkly chevron situation that I found in a thrift store ages ago and have never worn, and I was like deciding what to wear, and I thought, hey, let's give that a spin. But yeah, the reason I bought it was because it made me think of Twin Peaks. So yeah, if you made it this far, leave me a Twin Peaks themed emoji in the comments, like a cup of coffee or something. That would be rad. So yeah, anyway, I'll wrap this up, and thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye.